The Strait of Hormuz is often discussed as a military flashpoint or an energy bottleneck. But there is a deeper question that policy circles rarely answer directly. Could this narrow waterway become the moment the US dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency? The stakes are not just about oil prices rising for a week, but whether the physical ability to move crude can override the digital infrastructure of global finance. By the end of this explanation, you will understand how a blockade in one specific channel forces a re-evaluation of American hegemony and why military superiority alone cannot guarantee that dollar-denominated trade remains stable. For decades, the logic was simple and seemingly unbreakable. The United States projected naval power into the Persian Gulf to ensure the free flow of energy. In return, oil-exporting nations priced their crude in dollars, creating a perpetual demand for American currency through what economists call petrodollar recycling. This arrangement relied on an implicit security compact. If Iran or any other actor threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, the United States would intervene swiftly enough to keep ships moving and contracts honored. That assumption has now fractured. The collapse of this security compact transforms a logistical choke point into a strategic liability where geography begins to dictate terms that no amount of naval firepower can easily reverse. Consider the sheer scale of what passes through this strait every single day. Roughly 20% of all global daily crude oil exports flow through these narrow waters. This is not just volume, it is the lifeblood of industrial economies worldwide, and because those transactions are settled in dollars, any disruption hits the financial system directly. A sustained blockade or a coordinated mining campaign could spike prices to $200 per barrel within days. Such an event would trigger hyperinflationary pressures that destabilize purchasing power faster than traditional monetary policy can respond. The market does not care about geopolitical narratives. It cares about supply and demand, and when supply vanishes from the only viable route, panic sets in immediately. Quick resource note, I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. Here is where the conventional wisdom fails most spectacularly. We often assume that because the United States possesses overwhelming military superiority, a crisis would be resolved quickly enough to prevent lasting damage. But simulation data reveals a more nuanced reality known as nonlinear confidence collapse. Even if active hostilities cease or are contained, commercial traffic can remain suppressed for months due to prohibitive war risk insurance premiums and the sheer fragility of just-in-time supply chains. Ships do not sail into danger zones simply because the enemy is defeated. They stay away until insurers are willing to underwrite the risk at rates that make trade profitable again. This creates a scenario where military victory does not guarantee commercial resumption, leaving markets in limbo while prices remain elevated and volatility spikes. The asymmetry of this battlefield highlights diminishing returns on U.S. naval dominance as a currency guarantee. A degraded but geographically entrenched force can contest the choke point effectively enough to deter all but the most desperate shipping lanes. When major oil producers cannot transport their product, they face immediate pressure to find alternative settlement mechanisms that bypass the dollar entirely. This is not a theoretical possibility, it is a mechanical failure mode where physical geography overrides digital financial infrastructure. If traders and nations begin settling transactions in other currencies or through barter arrangements simply because insurance companies refuse to back dollar-denominated contracts for Hormuz-bound vessels, the foundation of the reserve currency begins to erode from the bottom up. This brings us to the critical threshold that defines whether this is a temporary shock or a permanent regime shift. Current evidence suggests that a prolonged 90-day traffic collapse generates severe economic pressure on the United States and its allies. The global economy would feel acute pain, inflation would surge, and confidence in dollar stability would waver significantly. However, we must be precise about what happens next. While such a disruption forces a re-evaluation of U.S. hegemony, it does not explicitly confirm an immediate total currency regime shift or the permanent death of the dollar as the global standard. The distinction is vital for accurate strategic planning. We are looking at a moment where the liability becomes undeniable, and the cost of maintaining the status quo outweighs the benefits. forcing states to diversify away from single currency dependence out of self-preservation rather than ideological preference. The gap between understanding geopolitical risk as abstract fear versus grasping this specific mechanical link is exactly what separates strategic analysis from speculation. You are not looking at a sudden explosion that destroys the dollar overnight. Instead, you are witnessing a slow-motion structural failure where the inability to insure and transport goods creates incentives for decoupling oil pricing from U.S. financial systems. As long as the United States cannot guarantee physical security without incurring costs or risks that make trade unviable, the trust required to maintain reserve currency status evaporates. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a body of water. It is the stress test, where the durability of the entire global financial architecture is measured against the hard reality of geography and physics. This re-evaluation forces policymakers to confront an uncomfortable truth. Military power does not automatically translate into economic dominance when physical infrastructure becomes weaponized by adversaries who understand their own leverage. The dollar remains a powerful tool, but its utility depends on a functional supply chain that can be disrupted with relative ease compared to the effort required to repair it. As global actors calculate these risks, they will increasingly seek alternatives that do not rely on American naval protection for every barrel of oil sold. This shift is driven by incentives and constraints rather than moral judgment or ideological shifts. The strategic landscape has changed because the guarantee of security was broken, leaving a vacuum where new orders are being written in real time. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.